Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 672. My opponent started off with d4 and I played knight f6. And my idea here was to go into Grunfeld, which I did after c4, g6, knight c3, and d5. And so here my opponent played the fourth move on the list, bishop to g5, and one that I've only seen a few times. I didn't have a definite plan as to how to play against it. This is the kind of thing that often happens when you're trying to learn a new opening, and it's one of the reasons why playing a lot of Blitz is actually pretty good. You don't have to take these big chances in an over-the-board game. You can just try out your new opening in Blitz and see what kind of things turn up. But it's important to look at the games afterwards and figure out how you should have played if you want to really learn the opening. And I have been playing the Grunfeld over the board. Usually I get into one of the main lines with c takes d5 or knight f3. Okay, so bishop to g5 was played. And there's a couple ways to play. Knight e4 is the top choice, and there's also bishop g7. And so I thought I would take some time to explore this. I'm trying to learn this, as I said. And d takes c4, although I played it, it's not it's in the database, but it's not very popular. But well, this pawn is under some pressure here, the d pawn. And what I was afraid of in the bishop takes line is that if I go bishop g7, he could just take. And then if I take back, and naturally, then he can take the pawn. And the thing is, you can get a you can turn this into a gambit with c6. Is pretty interesting. If he takes the pawn, then you can grab here. And if he keeps taking, it's still a pawn sack. So that whole bishop g7 line is a pawn sack. But you can look at this. It looks like a pretty good pawn sack. You've got one pawns versus two over here on the queen side, which is not going to be a factor until the end game. And you have the bishop pair. Black has the bishop pair, and black has a big lead in development and a lot of open space for those bishops. So it looks like decent compensation. Let's see, there's other ways to play there after bishop g7. Bishop takes, bishop takes. Instead of taking with the pawn, I was worried about him taking with the knight. This is not a popular line in the opening book, but it's also a sacrifice, and it's a little bit harder to see the compensation. First of all, you don't want to give up the bishop pair, so you drop back here, and then white can just continue developing. And now you can go c5 and try and undermine the center in typical Grunfeld fashion, but well, white can shore it up with e3. You can develop and add more pressure, and let's see, d takes c5 is a recommended move here, and bishop takes b2, kind of a funny line. There was this sort of pin along this diagonal, but it's so it's kind of keeping the d pawn in check. But here it's not clear that black, to me, is getting a lot out of this. So I find this position somewhat tricky to play. So probably I would not go with this bishop g7 idea. But there's another way to play it, which is with knight e4, which is the most popular way. And also a common idea when the bishop comes to g5, playing knight e4. I was a little worried that he would just snap the knight off, but I guess that leads to a decent position. If we look at the main line is the bishop retreats, and then black takes on c3, solving the problem of that knight, and then takes on c4. And this looks like an okay position. White can go after the pawn, and black can defend it with his bishop, and play will continue. Neither side, or both sides, have the bishop pair. I still have the possibility of playing c5 at some point, and I'm actually up a pawn at this point, so I'll probably lose that. I'll probably lose that pawn at some point in order to help my development. But so that seems like a reasonable way to play. If we go back, there were some other ways to play there as well. Let's see, after knight e4, instead of bishop h4, I was a little bit concerned about this line. Knight takes, pawn takes, just because it looked strange to me. It looks like white's getting a lot of influence here with those advanced pawns. It appears there's no immediate way for white to take advantage of it. That the chess engine suggests queen d2. I guess maybe preparing for an early queenside castling, and then bishop g7. Black can castle to the king side. You know, if necessary, f6 can be played to relieve the pressure on the e-pawn, but that's not something that black wants to play in general because it closes in this bishop. But it seems like this is quite a playable position too. So I think going back to the game, in this position, I would play knight to e4 next time. Next time I see this, I will try that and see how it goes. Okay, but in this game I played d takes c4, which is not yet losing. It gives white a slight edge more than those other lines. So it's not a great move, but it's not the worst move either. It's still a playable position. So I went e3. e4 would have been maybe a little more accurate and aggressive. That's really e4, I think, is the move that really puts the question to that c5. So I still have a position here that I can play. Like bishop g7. He gets his pawn back. I castle. And he goes knight f3, and I get in the c5 move. So all this is okay. He castles here, and I go knight c6. And knight c6 is also an okay move, but I have to follow it up correctly. I played knight c6 with the idea of going to b4 after he pushes the pawn. And this is a case where I just didn't bother to count before playing that move. The thing is, after you play knight to b4, you have 3 pieces on the d5 pawn. So it seems like you're going to round it up if you don't bother to count. But if you count, you see that white has 3 pieces defending it. So in fact, after d5, which he did play, knight to b4 is no longer a good move. And so so I just played knight to b8. But knight to b8 actually is the losing move. I'm losing right out of the opening after that. So it's like move 9. The move that had to be played there to keep this position playable is knight to a5. And I actually didn't think about that at all. You know, I thought about knight b4 and I rejected that correctly because there's no great square for the knight to go to from there. So it's just going to get kicked back by a3, and it'll be chased to the a6 square. So it's not a good move. But knight to a5 is okay, and it's a little bit more active. First of all, it forces him to reposition his bishop. And then, well, you can kick the other bishop with h6, and then you can play a6. So a little bit of defensive pawn moves are necessary there, but keeping his knights out of some key squares, in particular this knight keeping it out of the c6 square, keeping that covered with the pawn. So having these pawns on light squares is pretty useful here. Let's see, the line does continue with knight e5 and then e6, trying to immediately undermine the advanced d-pawn. And notice this knight here looks a bit exposed, but the c-pawn prevents him from chasing the knight away, and it's defended by the queen. So it's not going to be in any immediate danger, and I suppose I can eventually move the b-pawn if necessary to give this b7 square to the knight so it can retreat and get back into the game if I can't ever manage to get it to c4, which would be better. Anyway, this is still good for white. White can defend this pawn in a couple of ways. If he pushes the pawn, by the way, it seems it gets isolated and weak after that. And if he takes, it just helps me develop with bishop takes e6. So probably white should just defend the pawn and try and hold on to the center here. And we get typical kind of Grunfeld play where white's got the big center and a little more space, and black is trying to undermine things. But after knight to b8, my lack of development here combined with white's advantage in space is actually losing. The engine already gives us over a +1 advantage to white. So and white plays this very well, so you have to say white's play was really logical here. So he just holds on to his pawns in the center and defends it, which is the first step. Let's see, I kick the bishop. He drops his bishop back to e3. Play b6. This is a bit of a mistake. I need to play a little more actively, and once again it involves a pawn sacrifice, but this time the pawn sacrifice is really the best move. So the engine is saying, yeah, develop the bishop, Don't let your pieces get stifled over here. Give up this c pawn. You know, you're not better here, but you need to get your pieces out at least. So I don't have enough compensation for the pawn. White is still winning, but I can maybe take off that knight and queen c7, start to put some pressure on these guys. And then there actually is a bit of a skewer there, a little bit of a technical difficulty, and then going after that with the knight, maybe trying to round the pawn back up. But black is still, I mean, white is still better in these lines. Also, you know, I thought at first, isn't this just great for black? He's going to win a piece by chasing this bishop away and grabbing this bishop. But there's this counter strike with d6 and setting up this tactic as well. So things are not very good here for black. White has too much activity here. So after bishop g4 and this line, actually it's probably best not even to grab the pawn. I was just showing what happens if he grabs the pawn. I get some compensation if he grabs the pawn, but I have to play precisely here with knight to d7. And I've got maybe a playable position, but white could have done better by not taking that pawn and just continuing to maybe harass my bishop. Okay, but in the game I played b6. So I defended my pawn. Let's see, he went h3. That was a little bit of a slow move, but anyway, I go queen c7. Bishop a6 would have been better here, by the way. Often an idea in these positions where you haven't developed the knight, or in this case where the knight got forced back, you can develop the light squared bishop here and force a trade of this bishop. I guess I wasn't really thinking along those lines at this point. I mean, this is not the greatest piece, but it can come to life when these pawns push forward. So, you know, the center is not fixed here, so it's not truly a bad bishop either. Anyway, I went queen c7. He went e5. Now that he's kind of secured his center, he's free to push it forward, driving my other knight back. And he comes forward with his knight to b5, hitting my queen. So all very logical play. I go queen d7, goes queen d2, taking aim at the h-pawn. So I have to defend it. Plays rook f to e1. So he's you know, he's got more space, and now he's centralizing his pieces. So once again, good play. I try to get some counterplay over here with bishop a6. He just defends and holds on to things. And let's see, I go knight c7, trying to get some more pressure over here. He goes queen to d3. Yeah, just adding more defense along this diagonal to the knight here. I decided to go ahead and trade off some pieces. I have kind of a cramped position here, so I need to do something about that. He takes back with the pawn, keeping the pieces on and forcing my bishop back. And then, let's see, he goes rook a to d1, centralizing, completing the centralization of his pieces. And as I said, this is all a very logical play, but in fact, the chess engine points out that white can already break through. Also, this rook on the a file is doing something useful as well. It'll keep this rook tied down even after I move the knight. But even more important in this position is that white has the breakthrough move e6, which he plays a bit later, but it's already winning here. Let's see, if I take the pawn, he can sacrifice on h6. So this is a computer line, but it just shows how good white's position is already. If I take the bishop, he can take on e6. So he's down a whole piece. But, well, look at where my pieces are. The knight is over here and has no squares. It has no moves that it can make. And so the rook is trapped. So I've got two pieces completely out of play, and then this bishop is hemmed in by white's pawns here, so it's not doing a whole lot either. Let's see, I try to block with rook to f6, say. I am a piece up, after all. Just rook a to e1, bishop to c8. But yeah, white just has a enormous clamp on the position and is winning. I didn't follow it up after that. It just the evaluation keeps going up and up, so there's probably some killer move right in this position too. Maybe he's threatening to take my rook off and then bring the other rook into e6 there. That might be the plan. In any case, a winning position for white already. But he played the natural centralizing move. This is also a good play. You know, if you don't see that breakthrough, you can't calculate it to the end. You just keep piling up on it. Let's see, I tried queen c7 here. He went bishop to f4, lining up the bishop against my queen. I was trying to find ways to take advantage of this. The bishop is a bit loose there. Let's see, I tried rook d8 here. He went bishop back to g3. Now the bishop is defended, so this e6 is once again a real threat. So I went queen d7, getting out of the path of the bishop, and he goes e6 here. So this breakthrough is winning. I take, and he doesn't even take back right away. He comes in with the knight, threatening the g6 pawn with mass destruction here. And this is really difficult. Let's see, I tried to defend with the queen, and now he takes with the rook. So he's got 3 pieces piled up on that pawn. And anyway, so I block with the bishop. He brings his rook over, similar to how we saw the computer playing in the earlier line. Let's see, I bring my queen over to f7, and he goes in with d6. So I took it. I thought after this move, rook e7, you know, he would just be trading 2 rooks for a queen, but it drags my queen away from the defense of the g6 square, the way he plays this. And in fact, there is a forced mate in this position. Rook e7 is one way to get to that mate, and the other way is just rook takes f6, also leads to a forced mate. But let's look at what happened in the game. It's very nice. He plays his rook here. I take it, and then he takes back with check. I take it, and now his queen comes in with check, and there's no escape. I only have one move, and then queen here is checkmate, because his bishop sitting over here innocuously on c4 is actually guarding the escape square of the king. So very nice mating pattern there, and a good game by white. Hope you guys like this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon.